You're listening to Conservation Connection. I'm Chance.
I'm Sarah Catherine.
We're a husband and wife team running an environmental education nonprofit that's focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week, here on Conservation Connection, we do just that by introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day across the globe.
We talk to professionals working to protect our planet and ask them about their career,
Their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
This episode is a collaboration with the Sun Valley Forum in Sun Valley, Idaho.
The Sun Valley Forum is an intergenerational meeting of forward-thinking professionals that come from a diverse range of disciplines.
These experts are on the cutting edge of what's happening in the fight for our future, and they've all come together at the Sun Valley Forum to share ideas and to collaborate on solutions for a greener tomorrow.
Let's get to the show.
Alrighty guys, welcome to another episode of Conservation Connection. We are incredibly excited to be back here at the Sun Valley Forum 2023 here in Sun Valley, Idaho. It's an incredible place. If you get the opportunity to come visit, 100% do it. We have a really cool interview lined up right now with Chance Glasco. He has done about 1 billion things in 1 billion different industries, but today he's the co-founder and creative director of Good Dog Studios. He's also a senior fellow with the Adrian Arsht-Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, and he's doing some really cool work bringing technology and gaming strategies to bear on conservation and environmental issues.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to meet you, Chance, which is really weird.
I know, right?
I know. My question is, which of you is the second Chance?
Yes.
It's
which
gonna
one
be
is the fat Chance?
It's probably both of those are me.
Yeah. Well, you are younger.
There we go.
But I weigh like 183, so I don't
So
know.
I've got you beat there too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
So I'm just going to rack up all the titles. But my favorite title that I've heard you use for yourself this week has been Chance the Grappler.
Yeah, that's one of my, given jiu-jitsu names alongside MC Capivara, which is basically MC Capybara.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Or just Capybara, or Capybara for short. It's a little easier to say.
And where did that come from?
Originally, I think I was given that when I was living in Sao Paulo. I was training at this gym, Team Fabian, and I don't know. I like capybaras, and they caught up on that, and they just started calling me like Gringo Capybara or something, and then it just became Capybara. And then at the gym I train at in Orlando, that kind of got out too. And then one of the other professors there started calling me that, but they also call me Chance the Grappler, so I don't think they can figure out.
Can't get away from it.
Yeah, I think Chance the Grappler makes it sound like I'm good at jiu-jitsu, so I kind of like the Capybara one better.
Well,
I think
like
they're all
them
good.
both. Yeah.
A man of many names.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have, again, many names, many titles for yourself. So why don't we just start with a little bit of background on who you are and your work in the gaming industry and kind of what your past has looked like and how you got to these positions that you're in now.
How far and how hardcore do you want to go back?
Ooh, as far as you want to go.
To the deepness of my soul and my childhood, or are we talking just like straight
Well, we only have 30 minutes here, so you choose.
Yeah. Let me see. So I've been making video games for 23 years now. I got started. I got really into PC gaming around early 90s when I played this game Quest for Glory, which was this point-and-click adventure game, kind of like King's Quest. But it had some RPG mechanics. Fell in love with that game, and it made me realize that PC gaming was this whole other level versus like having a Nintendo. There was, you could go in and like look at the code and change things, and so I didn't really have any resources to learn to program. So I found a couple of games, Gorillas and Nibbles. And Nibbles is like Snake on the Nokia phone, same thing. And I could see the code, and I would reverse engineer, figure out what the code was doing, and then start writing my own like little text games, like text adventure games. Fast forward to college, went to Full Sail University, studied computer animation. I got out, went straight to Los Angeles because there's a lot of work and, animation there. I was out there for a little over a month, failed finding any work. I was like sleeping in the back of my car, parked at a Gold's Gym for a while. So I had a place to shower in the morning, stayed with, made some friends out there, stayed with them some. So a mix of like staying with friends and being homeless, looking for work. Failed, decided to drive all the way back to Orlando where I lived. and stopped in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is where I was born, to see some family. Ended up there was a game company there, and they're working on this Steven Spielberg project called Medal of Honor, which probably heard of that franchise. Got an internship. 3 weeks later, they hired me. Put out Medal of Honor Allied Assault. That game did incredibly well, but no one wanted to work for the owner of the company. So 22 of us left, 22 out of the 30 people.
Wow.
Mass exodus, started a new company called Infinity Ward. Initially, actually connected with, at first we were actually still working with EA because EA didn't want to work with this guy either, right? They wanted us to kind of do our own thing and just work directly with us. And at some point, they wanted to pull us into their studio in Bel Air, which was, at the time, it was DreamWorks. DreamWorks, they had like a game division that EA bought. And it was like pulling 22 people into a team of like 300 something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would lose the magic that we had if we're just,
just numbers on a sheet.
Yeah, exactly. So we couldn't come to an agreement with EA, and we parted ways, but had to scramble looking for like, a way to pay our bills. Connected with Activision, and Activision was like, we'll give you the creative freedom to make the game you want. You can, have your own studio, but we have the rights to buy you, halfway through the development of this game, right? And so we had to make a franchise or make a game to compete with Medal of Honor, and that's how the very first Call of Duty was created. And so that was only for PC. They had hired shortly after that. They hired another studio. It was Spark to do console versions of Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And then, after that, we did well. It was like, I think we sold close to 1 million copies, which is really good for an unheard of IP, but not like Call of Duty is now, right?
Right.
We wanted to be on consoles. And so Xbox approached us, Microsoft, and they said, hey, we've got a new console, Xbox 360. Do you want to have a game on that? Do you want to be a launch title, right? And so a launch title is one of the games you can pick up right when the console comes out, which means you have a very high attachment rate. A high percentage of people are likely to buy your game because they don't have a lot of choices.
Right.
Except with Call of Duty 2, I think we had like over a 70% attachment rate, which means like over 70% of people that bought an Xbox bought our game.
Wow.
Which is wild.
Yeah, it was
especially
crazy.
Given how popular the 360 was when it came out.
Yeah, I think the only way to beat that might be to, do it the old school way where the console comes with the game, like Super Mario Brothers, right? But so that's kind of launched us a little higher in the stratosphere of sales.
Yeah, you might say that. Just a little
it was
bit.
like, I think it was maybe like 4 or 5 million, when we did COD 2. But by the end of Call of Duty 2, we were very sick of World War II. We'd worked on World War II games for longer than America was in World War II.
Right.
And so decided to, we're like, we have all these good ideas for a modern day Call of Duty. There's different weaponry, there's helicopters, there's different tactics, a lot of cool things you could do, but you couldn't do it in World War II. Right. And so the two heads of our studio, Vince and Jason, they went to Activision and said, hey, how about a modern day Call of Duty? And Activision responds like, hey, look at these numbers. World War II is as popular as it's ever been. Why would you
Why are we changing the formula?
Yeah, exactly. You're making so much money now.
Right.
And we're like, well, we're creative people. We don't.
Classic failure to innovate.
Yes, exactly. And it's like if you have a bunch of creatives, even if they're really talented, if they're not into what they're making, they're not going to make a good game or music or whatever it would be. So they come back and they're like, Activision said, no, we got to do another World War II game. And I don't remember who it was, but someone was like, what if we just lock them out of our studio for like 2 or 3 months? Like prototype a modern day Call of Duty. We know it's going to be so good and they're going to accept it. And that's what we did. We literally didn't let them come into our studio for months, which I don't recommend. It's not typically going to work out if you do that. But yeah, they were at first obviously upset when they saw that we weren't doing World War II, and but they're like, "Damn, this looks good." So
there you go.
They ended up being their most, to that date, their most successful game franchise ever. I think the Modern Warfare series. So
you're like, we told you.
It's worth it to listen to your talent.
But let's fast forward a little bit and get to why I'm in Idaho in a town of 3,000 people.
Yeah, I was going to say there's so much gaming going on, right? But we're like, the name of the show is Conservation Connection. So why are you here with us?
Like I mentioned before, I went to Full Sail University in Orlando, became pretty good friends with the president, the CIO, a lot of the, heads of the university. And at some point, I had a VR startup, and it was kind of it was a bad timing. It was after the investment craze was over and everyone was afraid to invest in VR.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it was before the metaverse craze. And we basically had a VR metaverse that had actual utility. So anyways, that didn't work out. Shortly after we were kind of winding that down, the president of Full Sail, Gary Jones, said, "Hey, I want you to meet a friend of mine, Rosemary Mann," right? And they had worked together at the Nature Conservancy. Yes.
Yeah.
And they were looking at a way to reach, Rose works with Arsht-Rock, which is the short form version of what we talked about earlier. They have a goal to reach 1 billion people with climate resilient solutions, right? And so that's basically making 1 billion people more resilient to climate in some way, right? And we have an extreme focus on extreme heat.
Right.
As well. But really, it's just kind of climate in general. And a billion is obviously a big number. I think they kind of might have picked that because 1 is nice and sounds solid.
Nice and clean.
I was like, what if we, go for like 300 million through games? Just try to set that bar a little more achievable, right? And the reason that games came up is because, it's almost 3.5 billion people are playing games now. I think the last numbers of 2021 or 22 is 3.2. The pandemic spiked that a little bit. So we're almost at 3.5 billion people playing video games now. So that's obviously a great way to reach, people. If there's, close to half the planet is into them.
Well, yeah, especially when it's something that is inherently fun and engaging for people, right? Through gaming, it's a platform where you can reach people when they're not expecting it, right? And they're going to keep coming back because the game is fun, but you can also work in all of these other educational opportunities.
Yep. And so, started, I connected with them and kind of made a plan on, what's the different ways we can actually reach these numbers. It's not going to be one way. And so we have these different initiatives that we have going, and one of them is we've been giving grants to like to AA and indie games, that are featuring some of this climate content that could make you more knowledgeable, supporting projects in other ways, even if it's not monetarily, they support the game that I'm working on because we're putting some extreme heat issues in there and some health issues. They've supported it through when we go and we show our games, I get to say, hey, look, this is one of our games that have climate resilience issues in it, and so that's cool. We also work with AAA, studios to collaborate with them. I don't want to make any official announcements yet until I'm sure that we can say it because there are some big studios. Let me see. We have a center of excellence. That's basically resources, advisors, and whatnot to help out people in the game industry, to have the tools to include some of these topics. And we do a climate workshop that's focused around game design. So how can you design a game that actually motivates people to change their behavior or gives them some kind of useful knowledge?
Yeah.
So we run that at GDC, at the Game Developers Conference. We've given it to Unity, so whether it's AAA or indie game developers, anyone can really benefit from this workshop.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And I one of the themes that comes up over and over and over on the show is that I don't care how you're helping the planet. You're using your skill set, your talent, your industry to bring it to bear on environmental issues. We've seen it from fashion designers. We've seen it from investment firms. We've seen it now from game designers. And I really love the beauty of taking whatever it is you're doing and bringing that to the climate fight, because we need all hands, all decks, everybody involved in this work from all angles. And this is an excellent example of that.
Yep. Yeah. It's not something I would have guessed I ended up in. I've always been someone that's, appreciated the environment, loved the environment, knowledgeable about what's happening climate wise, but I've never been like quote unquote environmentalist. I just considered myself not an asshole.
Right. You just happen to care about humanity.
Just because, I recycle, don't give me some special title, or because I, help clean up the environment. I don't need, that should be normal. We don't need should be just a normal status.
Right. That should be the status quo. That shouldn't
exactly.
be like a big old thing. Completely agree. So I want to kind of zoom in a little bit and hear about like this style of including climate resilience themes in a game in a project that you're currently working on. So can you tell me a little bit about your current game that you have in development and the ways in which it ties in climate resiliency?
Sure, yeah, I can give you some examples. So a little background on the game. It's called Martial Arts Tycoon Brazil. I'm kind of combining my passions, which, one of my hobbies or main hobby, I'd say, is I train jiu-jitsu. It's from Brazil. And, I've been doing this since about 2010. It's just a way that I spent a lot of hours, in front of my desk, making games, more than 40 hours every single week. I needed something to like balance out that lifestyle. And so for those that are familiar, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a form of grappling, like wrestling, except there's submissions, which basically means you put someone in a situation where they literally give up because if they don't, they're either going to go to sleep or they're going to, lose a limb or something.
Yeah, it's going to be bad.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you're training with someone, if you're, everyone taps, but if you've got it, you're training with someone, they're probably not going to break your arm. They're going to be like, okay, why aren't you tapping? I'm going to stop putting pressure. But but the whole idea is that you can actually, train it almost 100% without actually hurting each other. Because by the time you're here, your arm's extended, like 75%, you've already pretty much lost, and you're ready to tap, right?
Right.
And so it's just, like I said, just a way to balance out that desk life. And I also played a lot of like Sim Tycoon style games, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Sim City, RimWorld, Dwarf Fortress, all these kind of
big
like
sandbox, like build what you want kind of games.
RPGs. And I always thought, why hasn't there been a tycoon business management game around running a martial arts gym? It seemed, we have like hospitals and, like for instance, 2 Point Hospital has done incredibly well. But if you go up to 100 people and be like, hey, are you into hospitals? They're like, what?
Excuse you?
Yeah, exactly. But if you go up to 100 people, like, are you into MMA, are you into martial arts, jiu-jitsu? Some of those people are going to say yes.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like interesting as someone that spent a lot of time on the mats, watching what's going on, kind of understanding a little of the business side too, and just dealing with different personalities. It just made like a really interesting kind of setting to have a video game in, right? A management game. And so, I decided to, I had a client that I was consulting for, and he wanted to start a studio, and, he had a lot of experience in money raising, like CEO type stuff. And that's kind of where it was more my weak area. And so Randy and I combined forces and started Good Dog Studios and Martial Arts Tycoon. So how does the climate stuff get involved? Well, you start in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, right? You're in a favela. You've inherited the favela from your uncle, who just kind of, well, not really inherited. He just disappears. And Lucas, the main character, wakes up with a capybara and a walkie-talkie around his neck.
Nice.
And it's his uncle's voice coming out. He's like, Lucas, I had to leave the country. You got to take care of the gym. I'll explain later,
That's amazing.
Yeah. And he's just like, he wakes up. He's like, why is it a capybara at the end of my bed?
What a hook to start a story
Yes,
with.
exactly. And so you inherit, you play Lucas. You've got this, these two buildings that you're kind of starting on. So you're training people on the rooftops. So obviously, if you're training on the roofs in Rio, that's going to get really hot. Heat is an issue. So we have within the game, every day we have a temperature, right? And the temperature is based on the median temperature for Rio de Janeiro with a little bit of variance, plus or minus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of rolling the dice on that. So there's a very small chance that you could have a heat wave. And a heat wave, depending on the intensity, is a threat to your NPCs, to your non-player characters, the people that are training at your gym. And so Arsht-Rock has actually developed a heat wave naming and categorization system, right? Like we have for hurricanes. And when there's a hurricane, people are like, oh, there's a hurricane coming. Tell me about it. Oh, it's category 4. Its name's Gustavo.
Right.
And people respect that. Oh, like Gustavo's coming.
Right. It's this anthropomorphization of it.
Yeah, exactly. What is Gustavo doing? And you wake up, oh, let's check out Gustavo,
Yeah.
and before you know it, Gustavo's a supervillain.
And at your doorstep.
Yeah, and people talk about it like it is a supervillain. You don't even know it's a hurricane unless you have context, right?
Right.
For heat waves, it's like, hey, I
gonna
heard
be hot.
there's a heat wave outside. Oh, how hot is it? I don't know. Reckon it's dang hot. You
Pretty
know,
hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably should drink some water.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like-
absolutely.
And heat kills a lot of people. You know, and so we need people to respect heat and heat waves in the same way that they would a hurricane.
Yeah.
So
you're tying in this mechanic of like heat waves as these external forces and as sort of a reflection of a changing climate into the mechanics of managing your gym in the game.
Exactly. So for instance, let's say you have, a category, it's broken category 0, 1, 2, and 3, right? And basically the higher that number goes, that means there's more people at risk for, death, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, And so if it's, for instance, a category 0, it might just be like, okay, make sure they've got some hydration. But a category 2, you might say, okay, I need to build actual shade, get some fans, get some more hydration,
mitigation strategies.
Category 3, you might just decide to just shut down the gym for a day or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's different ways that you have to, protect your fighters. And so depending on how high that category is, they're at higher risk of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. Also looks at, for instance, are they older NPCs? Do they have any negative health traits that could affect that too? So it's, and then on top of that, you could have, for instance, it rains, there's puddles of water. You maybe don't have a janitor and that puddle of water sits there and mosquitoes lay eggs, and these mosquitoes can carry Zika, dengue fever. You don't want that to happen to your fighters either.
Right.
So the idea is like integrating some of these issues where they fit, not trying to fit them where they don't or feel out of place.
Right.
And if you're making a game that's very simulation heavy, like a tycoon game, there are a lot of opportunities, especially when you're dealing with people being outside.
Right.
So it seems like you're pretty knowledgeable about the environmental side of this, right? So you have to know a fair amount about like the heat waves and the science and all of that. And is that something that has been kind of like a learning process for you as you've started doing this work?
I wouldn't say I'm pretty knowledgeable. I'd say
you're knowledgeable enough to have a conversation.
For game development, yeah, exactly, right. I would. Around my peers, I feel not knowledgeable because obviously I'm around people that their jobs are literally, related to climate or environment, right?
Right.
So yeah, for your average person, I'd say I'm pretty knowledgeable. And for, I've obviously picked up a lot working at working with Arsht-Rock. So yeah, I'm, always learning, always absorbing more information and just trying to expand my knowledge so that I can have more of these conversations and not sound like an idiot.
Isn't that everybody's goal to just not sound like an idiot?
Yes, that's high goals.
Yeah, yeah. You can sometimes sound like an idiot.
Yeah,
That's how you learn not to do that.
It makes you
anymore.
more human.
Exactly right, and it's how you grow. I love it when I'm on the show and I ask a question and somebody's like, "That's completely not applicable at all. Here, let me teach you the ways in which your question is not applicable to what we're doing," because it means that I'm learning, right, and I'm growing as a person and growing in that knowledge.
Yep.
So beyond this game that you're building currently, what is next for you? What do you kind of see as the future of gaming, and do you see more tie-ins of climate change, whatever that may be?
Yeah, there's a lot of games that include issues that have climate issues in them, and we didn't even work with them, right? So I'll go to, for instance, PAX, which is one of the big indie festivals, and basically go around and I look for games that could potentially have climate issues in them, right? And a lot of these games already have them, so it's organically occurring. It's not just because there's a nonprofit that's helping this happen, but we're there to support these companies. We also work with Climate SIG, which is basically the climate special interest group for game developers. We're a Discord server of over 750 devs, people that work for AAA, indie, everywhere in between, and probably a few people that aren't directly a game developer, maybe business side or something. And that's basically this support group for those that care about environment and the planet and want to somehow make some kind of positive impact. So we can collaborate, exchange resources, do studies. So that's a really great group. So you can, obviously I don't have the Discord link in my head, but if you, Google Climate SIG, you're probably going to find us. And yeah.
Cool.
Also, if you are a PC gamer, you can go to Steam. You can type in Martial Arts Tycoon Brazil, and you can wishlist us, and that will actually help us a lot when it comes to working with publishers, raising money. It's a good indicators of how well your game's going to do. So feel free to do that if you're listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys are listening and you're interested, scrolling down to the show notes, I'm going to do my best to drop some links there that'll take you where you need to go to get that all figured out. Definitely something that we want to keep watching. Do you have an idea of a release date?
Not
I know that is
next year.
Next year. Cool.
Solid.
Easy.
It's kind of broad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're I'm going to Sao Paulo on Saturday or Sunday, and we'll be doing the world premiere, showing the teaser trailer. So that I'm excited to go back to Brazil. I lived there for 3.5 years. So yeah, I'm pretty hyped.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's fantastic.
So just kind of to wrap up here, if someone's listening and they're like, man, I've always wanted to get into gaming, but this sounds like an amazing way to kind of connect it to the environment and like help in another way. Again, conservation connection, right? So we're trying to show how like every industry can somehow be connected. So what would your recommendation be to someone listening who wants to get involved in something like this?
Well, I'd say, if it's specifically games, are you saying someone that already works in games?
Not necessarily. Maybe they work in games, or maybe they're younger and are like, I really want to work in games.
Yeah, okay. I would say, if you want to work in games, the good news is there's tons of free resources online, whether you're using the Unity engine or Unreal Engine. There is tutorial after tutorial and helpful communities. I didn't have that when I was a kid. I didn't really have the support structure. So do a little investigation. If you're more science and math oriented, you might look at being an engineer. If you're more creative, artist, creative director, whatever. And then as far as connecting that to the environment, we can probably drop that Discord link for the climate SIG in the details, hopefully, and then they can click on that and get to know people. First you got to figure out what you want to do in games, and then once you figure that out, then you can kind of figure how do I make some kind of positive impact on the world, through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're, like you said, we're very fortunate to be in a day and an age where if you don't know how to do something, there are about 1,000 YouTube tutorials on that exact topic that you can click on and find it. And I've always found within the tech industry, not that I've ever worked in it, but I try to keep my fingers on the pulse of a lot of different industries, that it's an incredibly welcoming community to people who are looking to get into it. Like, I think people are very, very willing to share their knowledge, expertise, and mentorship with people who are trying to get into it. So
yeah, people aren't trying to hide what they know typically. Yeah. They're willing to share. So.
Yeah, because if you learn how to do it too, you can take some of the workload off of my plate as we're doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Guys.
This was a really fun conversation.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts helps other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to everyone working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. See you next time.